Welcome back to the Daily Living Jewish Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class. We continue with some super relevant halachas relating to making brachas. Let's start with a brief recap of what we've learned so far. For those of you that didn't invest, it's good to bear in mind. Anybody who has considered perhaps at least sometimes making a bracha before eating food, only good will come from that. It will only bring brachas into your life, excuse the pun. And if you do want to bring those brachas into your life, then this is how you do it. So just a quickly review what we learned last week. Firstly, we said eating without making a bracha is like sacrilege. If you've never heard of the word sacrilege, you could Google it. It means to misuse something that's holy, a holy article. So why would be eating an apple without making a bracha like sacrilege or sacrilege? Because the apple is God's apple. And if it's God's apple, it's holy. And so how would we have the right to eat it? The moment we make a bracha, we release it from its elevated status so that we too can benefit from it. So that is the significance of making a bracha. It makes it something that we now are allowed to benefit from. In simple English, making a bracha is like gaining permission, gaining access. So next time you eat that apple, you might very well want to bring another bracha, another blessing into your life. Okay, now if it is impossible to determine which bracha should be said, then you say the bracha shahakol. It's a very simple bracha. It starts like all brachas, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shahakol nihiyah bidvarai. It's just 3 words. It means that everything came into being by Hashem's word. So this is an all-inclusive bracha, as we discussed. It is not ideal because you'd rather thank somebody for something more specific than just say thank you for everything. But if you don't have any other words, if you're at a Russian party, a Russian Seder, and the only Russian you know is to say thank you for everything, then rather do that than leave without saying thank you at all. If you know a little bit more Russian, then you'll be able to say thank you for the potatoes and thank you for the vodka, and that will be more appropriate. And simply when it comes to brachos, we should increase our language, our vocabulary, so we can thank Hashem for each food with the appropriate bracha for it. But if it is impossible to determine the specific bracha appropriate for that food, then at least we should give a general bracha by saying shahakol nihiyah bidvarai. We said one needs to hold the item in one's hand when one makes a bracha. It should at the very least be in the room. Meaning it should be in one's hand, but if it wasn't even in the room, the bracha is no good. If you drop the item after making a bracha, you might very well need to make another bracha. Not to make any interruptions between making the bracha and swallowing. So if you're at a bar mitzvah and you're catching up with a buddy and you've just made a bracha on your whatever it is, on your cake, and you put the cake into your mouth and you say, how's it? So if you haven't yet swallowed the cake, then that's an interruption. That's a problem. So don't make any interruption between making the bracha and actually swallowing. Tasting, we discussed it. If you spit it out, you definitely don't eat a bracha. That's not considered benefits. It's more like just a mechanical procedure to determine if the food does or doesn't need more salt. If you're swallowing and it's still just to taste, then it's questionable whether to make a bracha. So rather make a bracha on something else, or have in mind that you'll enjoy it while you're at it. We spoke about, I think this is where we're up to. We spoke about medicines and water. We said medicine is not considered direct benefit. It's indirect benefit. It has long-term benefits, but the benefit is not in the pill itself. The benefit is in the effect that the pill will have on one's system. And so one does not make a bracha on medicine unless you actually enjoy the taste. Similarly, if you're drinking water, and the reason you're drinking the water is just to down the pill, but you're not thirsty, then you actually don't make a bracha on the water. Or if you got something stuck in your throat and you drink some water, you wouldn't make a bracha on the water. But as long as you enjoy the water, or you're thirsty, then that already does bring you tangible benefit in and of itself, not just indirectly, and so you would make a bracha. So practically, most times you drink a cup of water, you will make a bracha, shehakol di'avad varai, because you're usually drinking it because you're thirsty. But if you are drinking water just to clear your throat or to take down a pill, then and you are not thirsty, then no bracha is recited at all. That brings us to halacha number 10. I see that the PowerPoint is still in the making. Sorry. Let's get the text up on the screen. Here we go. Okay. So this may very well have happened to some of you. And it's nice to know that the Torah still has a solution for you. And here's the scenario. If you unwittingly took food into your mouth without having said the bracha, so in simple English, you forgot to make a bracha. You ate without making a bracha. But you remembered that you forgot to make the bracha while the food is still in your mouth. So what do you do now? So it depends what it is that you're eating. If it's something that, if you remove it from your mouth, if you get hold of a napkin and you place it in the napkin, and then you make the bracha, then you put it back in your mouth, the food will not be spoiled, then that's the best option. Because then you could actually still, you haven't yet swallowed the food, so you could go ahead, put the food into a napkin. So I'm just trying to think of an example. I don't know, let's say you're having a piece of biltong or a piece of dried mango, and you put it in your mouth, and then you remember you haven't yet made a bracha. So you take a serviette, and you put it into the serviette, and you make the bracha, shakal di'avad varai, or the mango varai peri ha 8. Mangoes are 8, I believe. Or hadama. So yeah, there are 8. Anyhow, you take it out of your mouth, you make the bracha, and then you go ahead and eat it. So that is if it is something that you can't remove from your mouth into your hands if nobody else is around, and you'll be able to wash it around, or a napkin if somebody else is present. Now, why don't we just, I mean, it's possible, it's not recommendable to speak when you have food in your mouth, but under such pressing circumstances, it might be easier to just make the bracha while you have the food in your mouth than to have to remove it from your mouth and put it back in. So the Shulchan Aruch brings a verse which says, "Az yimale schayk fido." Actually, maybe it's a different pasuk, but the pasuk means, "Let my mouth be filled with your praise." Filled with your praise. Yimale pi sehilasecha. That makes more sense because it's for now. But your mouth being filled with praise implies that there's nothing in your mouth but praise. So if you've got a piece of biltong in your mouth, then that's not the way to talk to Hashem. It's not the way to praise Hashem. When we praise Hashem, we want to be fully all out, only praises. And so therefore, one should take it out of one's mouth and make the bracha and then return it. I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened to you that you were making a phone call while you're eating lunch, and the phone's ringing, and then eventually it doesn't seem like the person's picking up anytime soon, or somebody put you on hold and you're eating, and then they come back to the phone, or they pick up the phone just when you put food into your mouth. So what do? So some people might just talk while they have food in their mouth, but it's, might not be, it's not very pleasant necessarily for the person on the other end of the line to hear you talking with food in your mouth. Well, if that's the way that you wouldn't want to treat just a friend on the telephone, it's certainly not the way you want to treat Hashem. And so therefore, just like if you were on the phone, you would actually want to remove that food from your mouth if you didn't want to keep him waiting, so that you can speak to him like a bench. So too with the bracha, in order to make the bracha like a bench, if possible, one should remove the food from one's mouth, make the bracha, and then put it back inside. However, if it's something that will become unappetizing when ejected, maybe somebody's eating a chocolate, they've already chewed up on the chocolate, it's not going to really work, whatever the scenario is, then it's not an option to take it out of your mouth, because once you do that, you won't want to eat it anymore. So then, under such pressing circumstances, you'd be able to move it to the side of your mouth. Move it to the side of your mouth, and then make a bracha while it's on the side of your mouth. So yes, your mouth isn't only filled with praise, it also has food, but at least you're still making a bracha. The bracha still counts. Okay. If it's a drink where you're not going to be, you actually can't speak, you can't exactly put the drink into your cheek and then go ahead and talk, because that's not the way liquids work. So, as you know from the dentist, when he's giving you a nice clean, anyhow, if it's a drink, then what you would need to do is swallow, because you can't talk while there's drink in your mouth. And then if you have some more to drink, then you can make the bracha on whatever else is left in the cup. If there is nothing else left in the cup, since you remembered about making a bracha while the drink was still in your mouth, then you can actually make the bracha that says shakol da immediately after swallowing, and then you wouldn't make it after bracha. So that sums up if you remembered that you forgot to make a bracha while the food is still in your mouth. If it's regular food, remove it. If it's food that will become despicable, then put it in your cheek. And if it's drinks, then swallow and make the bracha. That is halacha number 10. Okay, now we move on to a general discussion, which is, again, super relevant. The basic laws of brachos. And that is, if you're eating more than one food, which is usually the case, usually when you sit down to eat, you're not just eating one food. So if you are eating more than one food, so how many brachos should you make? Or what bracha should you make? Because we mentioned earlier in one of the earlier halachas, in halacha number 2, right at the beginning, that if you make the bracha shehakol diyabid varai, that everything was created by Hashem's word, on any food it works, but it's not ideal, but it still works. It's like saying thanks for everything. It works, it's not ideal, but it still works. So if you're about to eat 2 different foods with 2 different brachos, we'll actually learn about it in halacha 12. I jumped the gun. Let's start again. Halacha number 11. If you're eating 2 foods with both the same bracha, so for example, you are eating, you're having a sausage, a hot dog, and a cup of water. Or you're eating a piece of schnitzel and a cup of water. Now the bracha on chicken is shakol diyabid varai, and the bracha on water is shakol diyabid varai. They both use the same bracha. So since they both use the same bracha, you might still say, look, you know what? I want to have as many brachas in my life as I can. Instead of making a shakol diyabid varai once and having in mind that the shakol diyabid varai is including both the schnitzel and the cup of water, I'll make the bracha twice. I'll make the shakol diyabid varai for the schnitzel, and I'll eat some schnitzel. And I'll have in mind when I make the bracha shakol diyabid varai that this bracha is being made exclusively on the schnitzel. And then I'll have in mind I'll make shakol diyabid varai again on the cup of water. And in so doing, you actually won't be saying Hashem's name in vain. Why won't you be saying Hashem's name in vain? Because since when you made the bracha on the schnitzel, you had in mind that it's only for the schnitzel, so that bracha did not extend itself to the cup of water. So when it's time to eat the cup of water needs a bracha which it never received, because you gave exclusive rights to the first bracha to the piece of schnitzel. So the piece of schnitzel is all that was intended when making the first bracha. So now the second food will require a second bracha. So although if a person does that, they're not saying Hashem's name in vain, they are making brachas unnecessarily. And that is also something that is not allowed. So if you can include 2 foods in one bracha, then you're not allowed to make 2 brachas. You can't say this bracha is only for the schnitzel and this bracha is only for the water. You'll have to make one bracha of shehakol on both the water and the schnitzel. If you didn't, when you made the bracha, or let's put it this way, when you made the bracha, you didn't have anything in mind. You just made the bracha shakol diyabid varai, and now you ate the schnitzel and you're wondering, do I need to make another bracha for the cup of water? So since the water is not as important as the chicken, and they both require the same bracha, so we say, okay, although you made the shehakol on the schnitzel, it will extend itself to the water as well. But if you made the shahakal on the water, and you didn't have in mind the schnitzel, and now you want to eat the schnitzel as well, you would need to make another bracha on the schnitzel. But it's worth mentioning, we want to always err on the side of caution as far as not saying Hashem's name in vain. And therefore, anytime we make a bracha, we have in mind that we're including all foods whose bracha is of the same bracha. So anytime you make a shahakol and you're eating, you'll have in mind that it's for the schnitzel, that it's for the water, and whatever else you're eating at the time. That is halacha number 11. So number halacha 11 says, don't make two brachas if you should be making one. Halacha 12 says the reverse. Halacha 12 says, don't make one bracha when you should be making two. So what's going on? We can't make up our mind. In halacha 11, we said that rather include two different foods in one bracha. And in halacha 12, we're going to say, rather don't include two different foods in one bracha. So the difference is, if each bracha has a unique role to play. If you have, just back to the example of the thank yous, you don't want to say the same thank you twice. If you could just say it once, then that works. But if it's thanking a person for two different things, then you want to acknowledge each thing individually. So if both of the foods, in halacha 11, it says don't make two brachas when you could make one, because both of the foods use the same bracha. But if the two different foods can each have their own personalized bracha, because there are two different types of foods, then don't include them both. So although we said in halacha number 2 that if you had in mind any works, that's, as we said, too general. So don't have in mind two foods when you make one bracha, rather make an individual bracha on each food that you eat. Let's see that inside. So you have two kinds of fruits, for example, a fruit of a tree and a fruit of the earth. So, for example, you're eating a orange and a strawberry, right? Strawberries grow on the ground, oranges grow on trees. Or a food over which the bracha shahakol should be said. Then, in spite of the fact that if you would have said shahakol on all of them, it would have worked. Or in theory, as we'll learn soon, if you make the bracha on fruits of the ground, on a fruit of the tree, it does work after the fact, because a fruit of the tree also comes from the ground. Still, at the outset, you don't want to group them. You want to give each food the bracha that is appropriate for it. So you'll first make a baracha Bayer Priya 8. Thank you, Hashem, for creating fruits of the tree, and eat your orange. And then you'll say a bracha Bayer Priya Adama. Thank you, Hashem, for the fruits of the ground, and eat your strawberry. And then you'll make a third bracha Shakol Yavid Barai, and eat your mushroom or your chocolate. Mushrooms don't come from the grounds. They come from anything. If we haven't discussed that yet, maybe we'll still discuss it soon. Another scenario.
What bracha on the watermelon?
Watermelons grow. It's not a tree. It's a bush. So you say Borei Piyadava. We'll speak more about how you define a tree, because it could become a little vague. We'll discuss how you define a tree in the upcoming halachas, please God. I see we're already at 5:21, so let me just finish off this halacha in another few words. Another scenario is if you're having both grapes and grape juice and wine. So you might say, maybe I could make one bracha on both. I could make the Borei Pri Hagaf, and thank you for creating fruits of the vine, and have in mind the grapes as well. She says, no, the bracha Bayer Pri Hagafen is unique for specifically grape juice or wine. So you would still make two brachas, Bayer Pri Hagafen on the wine or grape juice, and then another bracha Bayer Pri Ha'etz, thank you Hashem for the fruits of the tree, on the grapes themselves. More details to follow. Thanks so much for joining. Peace God, tomorrow.